That's right, folks. Let's talk about modern metal. I've already discussed some of my latest favorite bands, stuff like Igor, Archspire, Spirit Adrift, and Vexavoid. Uh, and then there are, of course, some of these kind of eternal favorites. You know, whenever Judas Priest puts out a new album, I'm gonna check it out. And they are actually releasing an album next year, also in March 2024. Then there's Megadeth, who they sometimes kind of drop out of my radar, but then they seem to be coming back. Voivod, I have forgotten to mention, they have been doing some really cool stuff these past 10 years or so. But how about some of the other stuff from the 2010s? So, let's start with a couple of older bands. Overkill, thrash metal, started all the way back in the 80s. What's really their trademark sound, I guess, is that the bass is kind of heavily involved with the things they do. Their singer also has this very raspy, hard-hitting voice, a bit like Brian Johnson from AC/DC. I think that type of voice, roughly speaking. Very cool band, and they've been doing this thrash metal thing for decades. But for some reason, I never really fully embraced their old albums. I guess Years of Decay, I believe that's their fourth album, was the closest one that I was kind of excited about. But there were a couple of tracks that I was a bit iffy about. However, Ironbound in 2010, this is a very cool album. The singer still has it. If anything, he sounds meaner and more demonic than back in the 80s. So years have done surprisingly good things to his singing, I think. Also, the guitar playing here is really energetic, and they kind of had this groovy thrash metal era in the 90s and early 2000s, but here they kind of come back to form and just have this balls out thrash album. And there are some really, really excellent songs here. Some really like short and fast songs like Bring Me the Night, Give a Little. Endless War kind of reminds me a little bit of Iron Maiden with all those really melodic things they're playing there. Killing for a Living is an excellent track near the end of the album. But also the way this album begins with the Green and Black and Ironbound is amazing. I think this is a really solid album. I don't think there's a bad song in the bunch. So I would definitely urge you to check this one out, and please check out also their older stuff. Years of Decay, pretty much, I think their first 4 or 5 albums are considered classics, and one of those bands that really doesn't get mentioned enough because they've been doing a long career and deserve the recognition they get. Here's another old band, I guess, from the 90s, Carcass. This band is kind of more akin to melodic death metal. I think back in the day, back in the 90s, or maybe they started in the late 80s. I'm not fully sure about that. I can't remember that right now. But anyway, they did kind of like this heavy death metal stuff, I believe, and then they went more melodic and gradually maybe a bit softer as well. But they always kind of retained this interest in making really interesting and cool songs. I think this is definitely a solid album. Surgical Steel. This is from 2013, I think, first released. It kind of reminds me of some of those Gothenburg sound bands from the 90s, something like The Haunted or Dark Tranquility. It's got a bit of that going on there. Very cool album, definitely check it out. And all in all, a very cool band also. So it's nice to see them back and returning with that album because they had a long hiatus before that one. Here's something a bit newer, Alitor. I believe this band comes from Serbia. This is from 2014. It's their first album called Eternal Depression. Very cool album. They have their own sound, but I can kind of hear influence from progressive death metal from the early 90s, bands like Death, for instance. So check this one out. It's a great album if you're into metal with some technical aspects in it. Here's Dead Cross. This is kind of I guess maybe you could call it a bit of like something like a crossover album. There's some metal elements here, but then there's kind of like punk elements to it also. Mike Patton is singing, and I think Dave Lombardo from Slayer is doing the drums here, and it's really as intense as you would expect. Some of the songs are really like almost make you nauseous, and then some of it's just really heavy and great, and it's if you want to hear something kind of more challenging, then that would be a great album and band to turn to. And then there's Vektor. Basically, they kind of saved thrash metal in their own right with this Voivod influenced sci-fi sound. Here's their first album called Black Future, and it's very good, very intense. The only problem, the slight problem that I have with this first one, it's kind of a long album for my taste. So with that speed, they're running through all the songs. It sometimes feels maybe a bit almost too much. I think this was originally released in 2009, but for some reason my album says 2010. So I don't know. Maybe this is it's like a new, or like a repress of the first one. However, the second album, Outer Isolation from 2011, this really solves all the problems of the first one. It's a bit shorter. It's really intense also, and some of my favorite songs are here. Like Tetrastructural Minds, I would definitely urge you to listen to that one. It's got it all. It's really fast. I believe they, like many other bands, they tune down to sound heavier. Vektor is a weird one. I guess they're tuning up to make it sound even faster and more intense. It kind of sounds like back in the day when you had cassette players and then you push the rewind button at the same time you had play on, and it just sounds like it's intensely fast. Like I can't understand how anyone can even play like that. But I've seen some of their live performances on YouTube, and they really are that fast and talented. So it's really a shame there's been lots of this hassle and bad press for Vektor lately. I would really like to hear new stuff from them. They have actually released one album after this one, but I'm not such a huge fan of that. It's back to the lengthier album. And it's also kind of doing, they're kind of trying to broaden the sound, and I kind of like it a bit tighter like they have it here. This feels more like a band album than their third one did. But definitely if you want to hear something kind of with more, kind of something more epic than this one, you should definitely check out their third album. I believe it was released in 2016. I can't remember the title of it right now, but it's been well liked by many people. Fast-paced Society is also very, very intense one here. There really aren't any bad songs. I guess Dark Creations, Dead Creators is one of those songs that people don't usually like quite as much, but it's the shortest of the bunch. And the opening track, Cosmic Cortex, it kind of does take a long way to really get going this album, but once it does, it's really cool and excellent, and certainly my favorite album from 2011. It might be my favorite album of 2010s altogether. So I definitely recommend you checking out Vektor if you want to hear something more modern in the genre of thrash. So there we go, and until the next time.